Good afternoon, everybody. It looks like most of you have entered and your audio is working. I'd like to welcome you today to our fourth COABE Atlanta series session called The Productive Struggle, and remind everybody that we are going to have a couple more of these. And COABE happens in March, and then hopefully we will have some more for starting next year, maybe earlier, so that we're not rushing up until February to finish the ones from this year. I'm happy to see that we have some of our previous PDFs. I see Rosalind and Donna and Sandra, Carolyn.
I saw Nicole. She popped in.
Is Nicole here? So it's always good to have the other PDFs here supporting one another. And it's great to have all of you here. So tell your friends and family how wonderful these webinars are. So I will let Lee introduce Carolyn when it gets to that point. So back to the last one, Lee. No, the next one. There, just as a reminder, hopefully you saw that in the waiting room while you were waiting, that we don't allow AI bots in our webinars because of system office policy. And believe it or not, there is almost always a bot that tries to attend, and Lee kicks them out.
I already kicked one out, so.
Did you really? I was just going to say, so far, none have come today.
No.
So please send your bot home if you brought him. Usually the bot comes by himself and is attending in place of the person. I believe the reason for this is because the system office doesn't really want the recordings on another corporation's server. So anyway, if you brought your bot, please send it home. And we would love for as many of you as possible to turn your cameras on. It certainly makes it easier for the presenter to see that she's not just talking to a void. And we will be putting you in a breakout room, hopefully twice today. We might not have enough time for the second one, but this will be an interactive session. And I just wanted to remind everybody that we are still registering for our credentialing courses. The course starts next week. I think that I said they could register through today, right?
Correct, and there are 5 spots left. So
there's just a few slots left. If you would like to still, if you know someone who wants to take the core, get them to turn that in. Language arts starts at the beginning of February, so there's still a little time to register for that. And then we'll run the core again March 25th.
And I will include those in the chat. I can't right now because I'm sharing my screen, but yes, I'll include that while our presenter is presenting. And
we like to show off that we have a new PD calendar coming soon at nctitle2.org. It's not quite ready to unveil. In fact, today, nctitle2.org isn't working at all. So hopefully it will be back online soon. Next slide.
Okay.
Wasn't there another one for me?
No, that's it. Unless you have anything else, Dan.
Thank you for coming. I will turn it over to Lee now.
Okay. So yes, as Dan already mentioned, this is the 4th session in our series on the COABE webinar presentations during the PDF network that occurred in 2023 in the spring. We sent a bunch of folks to the COABE National Conference as a part of that network, and they got a lot of great practices and instructional techniques and tips and tricks that they brought back to their provider, and we would like to share that with you all. So today, the lovely Carolyn Briggs-Gaul with Durham Literacy Center, she brought back a very interesting concept, the productive struggle, and how to support that in our classrooms. And so that is what she will be presenting on today. But I first did want to introduce you all to Carolyn, for those of you that were not part of the PDF network. She has been teaching high school and college level English and writing for 26 years. She's got an undergraduate degree in musical theater and speech communication from Southern Illinois University, as well as a master's degree in theater education from Roosevelt University. She's also a true thespian. She was an actor for 10 years. However, she decided to transition to teaching, and she taught English and theater for Chicago Public Schools, Illinois District 150, and the Illinois Community Colleges for 17 years. However, she is now in North Carolina, Raleigh, North Carolina, and she has been teaching for private charter and public high schools. And now she has settled into a Durham Literacy Center where she is teaching English, reading, and social studies for their youth achievement program. Carolyn is a mom to 3 teenage boys, and in addition to being an instructor, she also leads ghost tours in downtown Raleigh. I love that fact. And she runs a children's theater program on Raleigh's northwest side. So if you happen to be looking for something spooky this upcoming Halloween and you're in downtown Raleigh, I think Carolyn is the lady to contact. So without further ado, I gift thee the stage, Lady Carolyn, and I will stop my share now.
All right, now I got to share, huh?
Exactly.
Let me share my screen. Okay. Wrong thing.
I think you can go back one, hopefully.
Yeah.
Oh, it's doing the opposite.
No, this,
If you look down or if you move your mouse down, there should be a back arrow.
Yeah,
Yep, there you go.
Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Perfect.
Okay. All right, well, thank you. Let me get,
Nope, it's doing it again.
oh my Lord. Okay. We're there now. Okay, so thank you so much, Lee. That was very kind. So as part of the COABE presentation, one of the best seminars that I went to at the training in Atlanta was on the productive struggle. And I have tried to incorporate just kind of using what productive struggle is in my classroom from the get-go. So what is productive struggle? And it's basically just a real fancy way of just getting students to really think through problems for themselves, to process through things, to just get them to give them information and not have to sit and hold people's hand all the way through. I know at the Durham Literacy Center, we really struggle with getting our students to kind of break out of that well, what's the answer and what do I do now, and getting them to be independent thinkers and independent learners so that they can take these tests, so that they can move on, all of the good things. So at the COABE conference, I went to a wonderful seminar run by these ladies from Utah, and they used the Natural History Museum of Utah and a site called Research Quest to get their students to really start thinking for themselves and to start analyzing data so that then they could answer questions a little bit more using critical thinking skills, as well as to help with their essay writing. So I'm going to pull up this. I have right here on this slide, Research Quest. So I'm going to show that to you. I have to get out of here. And now my page disappeared. Hang on. All right, I'm having some technical difficulties.
Yeah, it looks like maybe you need to create a new page. Maybe you accidentally closed it. Yeah.
That's it closed out, but now the toolbar is not letting me so that I can open up a new page. Hang on, I'm gonna pause this.
Thanks everyone for your patience.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Technology things we just can't help sometimes. Carolyn just practiced this with us. It
I
worked.
know. All right, can everybody see that?
Yes, thank
Okay.
you.
All right, so this is the Research Quest from Utah. This is their site. All right, come on, let me in. You can go to different investigations. I'm going to click on this one from the Uinta Mountains. What it does is that it takes students through a science-based inquiry. Takes them through a science-based inquiry and asks them questions. There are videos. I'm going through this really quickly, but so what you're looking at right now is the first video. Then it would bring students to a series of questions based on these different slides. I give it to my students in a PDF so that they can actually like have it on paper as well as having it on the computer screen. When we are doing this, when I first introduce this, I bring them and we do this entire activity together. So we've got steps 1 through 6. We watch this video together. I give them a ton of information. We go through each of the different steps together. We work on all of these activities together. And then by the time we're finished going through one entire thing, I can then move on to another activity. I'm gonna back out. A whole other investigation. And I then let them do this on their own. Because the way that this is set up, each of the different sections, then they can do each of the investigations on their own. Then they can work at their own pace. So I'm sorry. When they get these support materials, that's what this looks like, is they get these pages and then they can answer the questions. By the time they're finished, then they go in, answer all the questions, they do things on their own. So when I saw this, I'm going to go back to the slides. When I first started using this, come on, thing. Okay. When I first started using this, then I was able to, give this at their student pace. And I thought, okay, this is all well and good, wonderful activity. And my students really responded really well to it. But how could I start to use this with something that was a little bit closer to the content that I was actually doing? Because this was very science-based. And I do English and writing and social studies. So I created a lesson using Shakespeare. And let me move on. And started using Shakespeare in it. And I just started using this new lesson with a separate ESOL workshop that I'm going to be doing. So can everybody see this now?
We can, Carolyn, yes.
Okay. Sorry. Just make sure I'm not speaking into the void.
You are.
Fantastic. So all of the examples and strategies have been reviewed. So then we just let the students work for themselves. They practice through the strategies in various forms, and I'm offering less and less help for each of the lessons so that they can do things on their own. So I think one of the biggest problems that I came across with doing productive struggle on my own is just allowing myself to kind of live in the silence. It's really, really hard to see my students struggling and to see them having questions and not wanting to jump in and save everybody. And that's where productive struggling comes in. So you're giving definitions and you're scaffolding new information. then really allowing for that time for students to be able to work through things. I'm offering different strategies in the beginning, and then as we work through problems, I'm guiding them to help them think about things in different ways, but also really focusing to make sure that I am having them focus on the process of how they get to this. And it's not just about right or wrong answers. So many of my students are really, really low literacy level students, and they just want to be able to come in and look at a paper, get the answer, put the answer on their paper and be like, I'm done. And it's really about like the process of learning. So what we're going to do is we are going to do something together with some Shakespeare. So I'm going to be giving you guys some information on Shakespeare, and we're going to be looking at two different monologues, working as students and working as instructors so that we can work through these on their own. So the scaffolding information that I'm going to be giving you is about not only these monologues, but as well as how Shakespeare uses the different poetry in these monologues, and then how we can understand Shakespeare a little bit more plainly. So for our objectives today, we're going to be looking at two different monologues. Both are from the play A Midsummer Night's Dream. If you are familiar with the play, this might be slightly easier for you, but I wanted to find something that maybe we could all come at it with like a little bit more of a student objective. So we're going to be talking about how Shakespeare's style of poetry, the different kinds of poetry that he used, gives us information about who these characters are and what they wanted. So when Shakespeare first wrote his plays in the 1500s, most people that were coming to see his theater were illiterate, and they were certainly not reading, they were not analyzing literature in school because people weren't in school. So he had to come up with ways to give his audiences clues as to who these people were, and how he did that was by using different styles of poetry for different types of characters. So in the first monologue that we're going to be looking at, this is from Helena, which is Act 1, Scene 1. And Helena is what is called, it's just kind of a royal or like a higher based character. Helena uses iambic pentameter. And before I explain what iambic pentameter is, I want us to watch this monologue, and then I'm going to go back and I'm going to give you a little bit more information about the style of poetry that's used. And we're going to analyze this monologue. So let's watch.
How happy some or other some can be. Through Athens, I'm thought as fair as she. But what of that? Demetrius thinks not so. He will not know what all but he do know. And as he errs, doting on Hermia's eyes, so I, admiring of his qualities. But things base and vile, holding no quantity, love can transpose to form and dignity. Love looks not with the eyes, but with the mind, and therefore is winged Cupid painted blind. Nor hath love's mind of any judgment taste, wings and no eyes figure unheedy haste, and therefore is love said to be a child, because in choice he's so oft beguiled.
Okay. So let's
Happy some or other some.
Need to skip ahead for just a second. Okay. So iambic pentameter, that monologue from Helena is in iambic pentameter. And what does that mean? So iambic pentameter is a line of a line of poetry, and iamb is a foot or a beat. So when we're talking about iambic pentameter, we're talking about the number of syllables or the number of beats that are in each line of poetry. And the best way to think of it is that we really do speak most of the time in iambic pentameter, because it's a stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, or unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed. It is a beat that we're speaking to. So if you look at the example I have here to the left, so delight the sun forlorn one day release. It's a up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. And it sounds like a heartbeat. It sounds like a beat to it. So penta means 5, which means that there's 5 meters in the poem. Iambic means that there are 10 syllables. So it's basically a line of poetry that has da 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 da, and it's got a beat to it. So Shakespeare considered this to be kind of like the highest form of poetry. The one, well, not quite the highest, but like the highest form that a human could have. That it's the way that we speak. It shows that a character has a little bit of education. It shows that a character has a little bit of a higher standing because they're speaking within kind of like a boxed poetry. Iambic pentameter is the poetry form that Shakespeare used for many of his sonnets and for a lot of his poems. It was kind of his favorite because you were able to pack a lot of information into one little section of a poem. Also, Shakespeare was paid by the word, so he liked to kind of express himself with as many words as possible, because then he's going to get paid more. So what we're looking for when we're looking back at Helena's speech again, and I'm going to give you guys, we're going to break into breakout rooms and we're going to be looking, you'll actually have the speech. We're going to be looking at what Helena wants and what kind of character that she is based on the fact that this is using iambic pentameter and based on kind of the words that she's using. So let's go back now that we know what iambic is. Again, we're going to look at it just one more time. Think about it from the lens of like, if you don't know anything about the play, I am going to reveal a little bit more about what's happening in the play. Think about the things that she's using and what stresses that she's putting on the poem. This is the information that I was first giving to my students. So when I was teaching this seminar with an ESOL class, I first just introduced these 2 monologues. We read through it. I talked about what iambic pentameter is. We're going to get to couplets in a minute. I also talked about free verse, but we don't have enough time for that today. And we talked about just what the objectives were, what these characters wanted, because we're hoping that then by looking at the Shakespeare, we can start to expand vocabulary just based on looking at these patterns. So we're going to watch this one more time.
How happy some or other some can be. Through Athens, I'm thought as fair as she. But what of that? Demetrius thinks not so. He will not know what all but he do know. And as he errs doting on Hermia's eyes, so I, admiring of his qualities. But things base and vile, holding no quantity, love can transpose to form and dignity. Love looks not with the eyes, but with the mind, and therefore is winged Cupid painted blind. Nor hath love's mind of any judgment taste, wings and no eyes figure unheedy haste, and therefore is love said to be a child, because in choice he's so oft beguiled.
Okay, so hopefully you noticed some words that were sticking out a little bit when we go back and actually look at the text. This will be easier. Let's move on to the next monologue. So this is Puck. This is from Act 5, Scene 1 from the same play, and hopefully you'll notice a difference in the poetry before I explain what the poetry is.
If we shadows have offended, think but this, and all is mended, that you have but slumbered here, while these visions did appear. And this weak and idle fiend, no more yielding but a dream. Gentles, do not reprehend. If you pardon, we will mend. And as I am an honest Puck, if we have unearned luck now to escape the serpent's tongue, we will make amends ere long. Else the Puck a liar call. So, good night, and to you all. Give me your hands if we be friends, and Robin shall restore amends.
Okay. So hopefully you notice the difference in those two styles of poetry. That one was rhyming. Come on, let's move past. Oops. All right. So that next poem, that next monologue, I should say, was in rhyming couplets. So the biggest difference within iambic pentameter, a lot of times iambic pentameter can occasionally have some rhymes to it, but it definitely is all about the number of beats in the line. A couplet is an even tighter poetry. It has to be, it's like little mini little stanzas, and it has a very, very specific beat to it. It reminds me of the Queen song, We Will Rock You. So we will rock you. So in this poem, it has a very tight kind of 1-2 beat, 1-2 beat, and it rhymes at the end of every other line. So if we shadows have offended, think but this, and all is mended. And it's got that beat to it. Couplets don't always have to rhyme, but most of the time that they do. And when I've got at the bottom, it says a couplet can be open or closed. Don't worry about that. That is in Shakespeare, what he used couplets for, because he considered this to be kind of like the most challenging of the poems. Couplets are used to show when a character has special powers, when a character is a god or a fairy or a wizard or a witch, somebody that's kind of like a little bit higher in the hierarchy compared to a human being. So we've got iambic pentameter, which is showing us like an educated person who fits within like a very structured piece of poetry. And then we've got a couplet, which is the most poem of the poetry. It's kind of like the most poetic. I think it's what we think of when we think of poems. Dr. Seuss used couplets when I do not like green eggs and ham. I do not like them, Sam. I am is a couplet. And it's an easy thing for our brains to wrap around because we can immediately identify the beats to it, and we can immediately memorize it quicker, and we can see things faster. And so Shakespeare wanted those to be like the best people. Now, the other style of poetry that's used in A Midsummer Night's Dream is free verse. And that is to show us kind of like our very lowest of the characters, the people who were lower class, who were like the working class people. And that we're not going to talk about today. We're going to go back and look at the couplet from Puck's monologue one more time, and then we're going to talk about how we can analyze these and how my students analyze these. So let's look at it once more.
If we shadows have offended, think but this, and all is mended, that you have but slumbered here, while these visions did appear. And this weak and idle fiend, no more yielding but a dream. Gentles, do not reprehend. If you pardon, we will mend. And as I am an honest Puck, if we have unearned luck now to escape the serpent's tongue, we will make amends ere long. Else the Puck a liar call. So, good night, and to you all. Give me your hands if we be friends, and Robin shall restore amends.
Okay. So we are going to be breaking out into sessions. Right now, I know that we've got a handout for everybody to take in your breakout sessions. We're going to be talking about what the characters are talking about and how do you know this? How can we use the information that I've given you? And so you're going to be thinking first as a student. So what can we assume about these characters just based on the fact that we've got two different styles of poetry? And I've already told you like what style of poetry is used for each, but then what does it tell us about those characters, and how does the things that we are learning from the poetry tell us that. And we're going to be looking at that PDF. So Lee, you're going to be handing that out and doing the
I
breakout
did. I
sessions?
shared it in the chat, so if you guys can download it, that would be great. And if you want to set up the part 2 for that as well, I will then put them in breakout rooms.
All right. So you're going to be looking at these 2 different monologues here. So, oh, how happy some or others some can be. Helena's monologue, as well as if we shadows have offended, think about this and all is mended. Puck's monologue, you'll be given those on the PDF. And once we go into the breakout session, I just want you guys to look at, think of this as just as a student. And then we're going to come back and think of it again is then how as an instructor can we support the productive struggle in this moment? So what are some things that we can offer our students to get them to really think about the answers to this question? And then how can we plan and prepare for this productive struggle? Now, like giving you a little bit of a clue in the beginning, when I taught this to my own students, and again, these were ESOL students who did not have any experience with this play, I revealed things very slowly, and I'm going to do the same for you. So we first went in and I gave them all of the information about iambic pentameter and couplets, as well as broke down which kind of characters could be given that. But then what do you think that if somebody came, think about this like as a student as well as an instructor, what are some other information that you can give to your students in order to support them in learning, in order to help them work through this PDF? Okay, how did everybody do? Thoughts? Anybody want to share about what they thought the characters wanted, or what kind of poetry styles were used? Did the information that I give you, was it helpful?
This is Heather Lucier speaking. I'm just going to confess for our group that we talked about productive struggle, but we did not stay with the parameters of the sonnets. So I think our conversation was related and ultimately what we're getting to, but it wasn't directly derived from the assignment. So I apologize.
Well, as long as, I mean, do you think that this is, I mean, hopefully it's something that you could see that you could use within your own classroom. I mean, that's the whole point, right? So.
Well, I mean, I think we talked about the idea about how to get students to be willing, first of all, to take risks and be creative and talk about without fear of being wrong, that mistakes are the expectation of learning, especially when you encounter new material, like if you're not familiar with Shakespeare, and that it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to say or do something outrageous because that's where the learning occurs. But also, too, we talked about kind of the need to inspire curiosity and creativity in some of our older students, because in some cases, not for all, but using broad strokes here, some of the creative, imaginative life has been sucked out of them over the years, and getting them to kind of dip back into that, modeling risk-taking yourself, as well as, making that safe environment. So that's kind of what our conversation went around to.
Okay. Well, did anybody talk about the Shakespeare?
We did. We talked about Shakespeare in our group. So this is Donna. However, we talked about the benefit of you identifying for us the vocabulary in the rhythm, because we just didn't have a clue, because none of us are English majors, nor do any of us have a love of Shakespeare. Sorry. And part of and part of that is because I can speak for myself. I don't understand it because of, I guess, the way things are stated. But when you did the first go round and then you did the explanation, did we start picking it up a little better? Yes. One of the other folks, James, had mentioned that he noticed that since he's a drummer, that there was that beat to it. And that kind of caught his attention. And for me, it was like, oh, okay, I see a pattern going on here. So, you know, as far as, you know, working on your piece, you know, we figured out with Helena, it might have been happiness versus love. And then for the second part, we kind of figured it was a satire, and that it was a conversation that if you didn't like the conversation, you can kind of blow it off as being a dream, like it never happened.
For sure. Thank you for that. That, I mean, no, I mean, it's like you're 100% correct. And that is one thing that I know I stress with my students all the time, that you are not supposed to know every single word in Shakespeare. There are 7 people who analyze his plays in the world and that can like tell you what every single word mean. And that's not the point. It's understanding, like you said, like the beats and hearing the patterns and then using just kind of the actor's tone and what they're saying to, you know, to like kind of get the meaning behind it. Shakespeare's audiences would not have understood every word that he made. Shakespeare himself made up 3,000 words. So a lot of times these were brand new words to the people that he was even sharing them with. But the first monologue that we did, Helena's monologue, and I'm going to show you guys a little comic strip that gives a breakdown of the entire play that then I shared with my students to give them a deeper meaning of the play. But Helena is, she's a lover. She likes a boy. The boy doesn't like her back. And she is reasoning with herself of like, well, I like this boy and I know that he's not great for me, but it doesn't matter because Cupid is forcing me to love this person and we don't get a choice in who we love. We don't get to, our heart wants what our heart wants. And she's essentially rationalizing because this guy actually treats her like absolute garbage. And she's rationalizing like, you know, essentially like her abuser, for lack of a better word, and how she's being kind of like crapped on by this guy. But she's like, but it's okay that I love him. It doesn't matter how terrible he treats me. I love him. And the second, you're absolutely right. It's an apology, but it's a sarcastic apology. Puck the fairy, he's speaking in rhyming couplets because he's that highest character. Puck is apologizing for the play if anybody has been offended by it, but he doesn't really mean it. He's been told by the Fairy King, go and apologize to everybody because Puck is the one that kind of messed everything up through the entire play. So he comes in, if we shadows have offended, think but this, it's all admitted. It's like, hey, it's just a dream. Don't worry about it. It's just jokes. We're totally fine. And this is just a lighthearted thing. This is a comedy by Shakespeare. Everything works out in the end. And it's supposed to be like a lighthearted laugh. And they definitely would have been like looking at the audience to see how they were gauging it. Like, hey, are we offending everybody? Because audiences going back all the way to the 14th century would have been pearl clutching because there was a lot of lots of sex jokes in A Midsummer, and they pushed the boundaries a little bit. So we're going to look at the next thing, just in case, if you need a quick summary. So this is a summary of A Midsummer Night's Dream. And I gave this to my students after we had gone through and we started analyzing it. I went back and I gave them this 1-page summary. We talked a little bit more about the play and about kind of the whole synopsis of the play. And then we went back to the monologues and see if we could even delve into it even deeper. So Demetrius, there are 4 lovers. Demetrius wants to marry Hermia, but she runs off with Lysander into the woods. Then Helena, that's the monologue that we listened to, loves Demetrius. She tells him where Hermia is gone, follows him into the woods. So now we got the 4 lovers in the woods. Bottom the Weaver and his friends are rehearsing a play in the woods. There's a king and a queen that have just gotten married and they're holding a contest. And they're off practicing the play. In the woods, the Fairy King, Oberon, uses his love juice on Titania, his queen, in order to make her give him his foster son. That's kind of a creepy That's the problem with A Midsummer is, yeah, that's gross. Oberon tells Puck, his hench fairy, to use the love juice to make Demetrius fall in love with Helena. He sees the lovers arguing in the forest and he feels bad, so he sends Puck off to do that. But Puck gets it wrong, mistakenly uses the love juice on Lysander. He falls in love with Helena instead. So now everybody's in love with Helena instead of everybody being in love with Hermia. Problems. So under the influence of the love juice, Titania falls in love with Bottom, remember one of the people that were rehearsing the plays, and then Puck, who's a jokester, gives him the head of a donkey because he just thinks it's funny, and Titania falls in love with the donkey. And they're all laughing about that. Puck correctly uses the love juice on Demetrius, and he also falls in love with Helena, and everybody runs around the woods confused, and they're all angry, and they're all yelling at each other. Then the love juice effects are removed from Titania and Lysander. Everything kind of works out. Everybody gets married. And then Bottom and his friends perform their play, and it's hilariously terrible. So that is the synopsis of the play. I am going to be working on this play with my ESOL students, and we're going to be just focusing on just these 3 monologues, because the whole purpose of this is not for them to analyze the play and to really delve deep in it. You could spend years just talking about Midsummer, but just using this to help expand vocabulary and recognize patterns within the Shakespeare, and maybe to get people to say like, hey, maybe Shakespeare isn't so scary, that maybe we can actually look at it and it's not something that like you hear Shakespeare and you're like, oh God, I could never, ever do that. So that is the whole thing. Anybody, Lee, what would, and so Shakespeare.
So yeah, we got a minute left. So
Yeah.
we were gonna have a breakout session. Obviously, we don't have time for it, but any questions for Carolyn about the productive struggle, about how to support it, about this lesson plan as an example of how we can really help our students marinate in that that moment of confusion and difficulty. Any questions for Carolyn before we wrap up this webinar? And yeah.
This entire lesson also, I know Lee has made it available. It's a 4-day, 90-minute sessions that you can see everything that I do with these lessons. And obviously, if this is something that you'd be interested in doing, I would have no problem walking it through, I mean, if you're thinking, well, like, I'd love to do something like this with my students, but the Shakespeare makes me nervous, I would help. Just let me know.
Yeah. So I just shared the first day, by the way, the lesson
Oh,
plan.
okay.
So if you want to get the whole lesson plan, feel free to reach out to Carolyn. Looks like we got a message. Okay. Yes, you're welcome, Heather. So just to wrap this up, thank you. 1 more minute, if I can. Oh, here we go. So we do have some upcoming webinars. Feel free to register if you haven't already. We've got a career pathways webinar coming up January 25th called A Circle of Support. Then we've got 2 more within our COABE series, one on generative AI for lesson planning. Definitely highly recommend that, February 13th, as well as fostering a work readiness mindset on February 27th, and one more career pathways on February 22nd, entitled Who Are the Advisors? Dan sends out mass emails with the registration information for that. So look for that in your inbox. Please register. Please join us. Thank you so much for attending the 4th session of the COABE series. Thank you to Carolyn for being our presenter and exploring Shakespeare for a brief moment. I certainly enjoyed it. So that's it from us. Take care. Unless Dan's got anything to say, we will see you next time.
Thank you for coming. Stay warm.